Google deliver some Nexus smartwatches? How Brexit is already causing tech price increases, and how can Apple maintain their high profit margins in the face of increasing competition? These stories, and we'll be answering your viewer mail, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 208 of the Pocketnow Weekly. So this weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile, smartphones, tablets, and wearables. All the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid, and the United Kingdom was a bit better united than they are right now. I'm Juan Bagnell, senior editor at Pocketnow.com, blasting the signal from sunny Southern California, joined this week by plucky podcast producer Jules Wang. How's it going out there on the East Coast, buddy?
I want my life back.
No, oh, no. Is Brexit also taking your life away from you too?
It's taking my life away. It's taking Nigel Farage's life away. I mean, like, what the heck? Boris Johnson, hey, get back on the set.
So we've just got all kinds of political news that we're not going to be talking about.
I'm just name dropping, okay? I'm trying to sound smart.
Well, no, I just like because I don't want to get too caught up into politics, but I do feel kind of bad for for Scotland. That they went through the whole vote to try and stay with the UK because they were going to be a part of the EU, and then the UK turns around this vote, which Scotland overwhelmingly voted against. And I just, it's a sticky situation that I am completely not qualified to discuss.
Well, you know what? We'll just Welsh our hands off of that.
That's a beautiful pun. That's a terrible pun. That's an awful pun. But I love it.
Horrible.
That was a great pun.
I give up.
Well, and also, I mean, really, when we're talking about puns, is the better pun? I mean, like, puns should be ranked so that, like, is it that you like the pun better if it's worse, or is it that the pun is better when it's like a really good, smart, savvy quip? You know what I mean? Like,
hey,
is it
Juan,
so bad it's good?
Juan, you know how viewers and listeners can reach us?
No, that's absolutely fine, because we should probably have more people joining into this conversation than me trying to analyze the psychology of puns.
I love
Jules,
puns.
Please do illuminate how might someone get in touch with us for this show.
Oh man,
This is going to be an excellent episode. I can feel it already.
1, 2, 3. Okay, so you want to join us, you want to figure out how to get into this wacky conversation that totally makes sense right now and is sensical in all sorts of ways. Well, you have ways to do that. On our Pocketnow website, you have the podcast post right here. And if you're watching, forgive me for the aspect ratio here. Some little screwy bug is going on. But you have this podcast post by our own Juan Bagnell, and he has cleverly decided to post this little link to the Google Plus event page for those that want to join our live question and answer panel. So do that. Go to pocketnow.com, click on our podcast post. It should be like 4th or 5th down the line right now, and you can access our Q&A panel right there, so you can finally ask questions live. It's been forever. People have been complaining, how come I don't see this? Like, what the hell?
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
We're still going through this process of analyzing how we want to keep doing the live broadcast. I mean, obviously we do this so that we can put together a really high quality audio version you guys can download, you can listen to over the weekend, however you want to set it up. But along the way, we also recognize that, there's a lot of fun in trying to do this live, having you guys join the conversation, having that chat be enabled. And there are pros and cons to using the Google Plus page versus broadcasting directly out of YouTube. And so at some point, we might examine whether or not we want to try and do that live chat from YouTube, but it's way harder for us to keep track of the comments that you guys are sending in using that live chat. Now, the flip side is, if we go through Google Plus, no one uses Google Plus, so it's really hard to find the Q&A.
But you know what everyone else uses? Email, Gmail, Yahoo, whatever the heck.
Jules, tell me more about this email that you speak.
So you want to head into your email, and you want to type into the recipient line, podcast@pocketnow.com, and you want to send along some questions that you might not get answered on today's broadcast. So you have that, you have our Hangouts, you have every way in the world to get in contact with us, and we want to hear from you.
Yes, we do. And we're actually going to be answering 3 viewer mails at the end of this show after we've teased a couple new items coming to the podcast and to the Pocketnow YouTube channel. But Jules, why don't we go ahead and jump right into some news? Let's keep this show lean and mean. How's about?
Let's do that right.
Let's
do that as soon as I can pull the slider up right now.
So, Google is not teasing us with some Nexus news, but we've got some leaks, some tips, some insider info. What might we see coming down the pipe for phones and wearables directly from the big Goog?
The big Google. So let's talk about what we have in terms of a design maybe for this Nexus from HTC. Actually, 2 Nexi. Or Nexuses. Actually, that's the proper
I like Nexi.
plural.
Nexuses. Nexi sounds clean. It's the same thing. Like
it does sound clean, but it's not proper English. But then again, what is these days?
I like taking photos. Like for example, right now we're sort of in praying mantis season in Southern California.
Yeah.
And my entire life, I thought the plural was manti. It's not. It's mantises, and that sounds so American clumsy. Like I want it to sound all cool and like Latin European or something. And I keep doing this thing where I try and make words sound fancier than they really are.
Well, these Nexi apparently share one design. So Android police have been, David Ruddick has been on top of all this stuff. And I want to give my kudos to him. He put together this little mock-up of the details of what he has heard about the Nexi. So we have sailfish and marlin, and one is 5 inches in terms of screen size. One is 5.5 inches. Apparently, they'll just share this kind of look, the mostly aluminum body, and there's this little. Well, it's not little. It's a large little portion. So you remember the Nexus 6P?
I do remember the Nexus 6P. I remember it like it was the end of 2015.
Yeah. I mean, well, you remember the little visor thing at the back that had the camera and stuff?
The LaForge camera.
Imagine that, but just exploded. Like the blob, took over the backside of it. It's not, I mean, we're talking about up down till the fingerprint.
It's like a third of the back of the phone, according to
third of the back of So that's pretty lovely looking thing going on there. I mean, we're talking about HTC designing this thing. I personally think that it sort of looks like Nexus 6P, but it also has elements of the 1M8 with the bottom curves that are very gentle and sweeping little antenna design. And antenna lines are just everywhere.
The first thing I wanted to throw out there, Jules, is do we really think that this is HTC design, or do we think that this is an example of Google
exerting its
that they're throwing more influence on what the Nexus should look like? Because I don't think this is a phone that HTC would make on their own.
I am not one to give.
Oh, come on, give me gross speculation. Make something up. Just make it up. Just lie.
Right. So Google is definitely taking control of itself here. But yeah, I mean, Sue never shy. Back when he did that code conference thing with Walt Mossberg, he told them, okay, so we're going to have more opinions on what a Nexus phone should look like. But I think they're just borrowing so much from HTC's previous designs. I mean, the front face, what can you do about the front face? It's just a normal looking kind of,
Yeah, I think we've reached sort of a plateau on what you can do to spruce up the front of a phone.
Yeah, and then the back of the phone is just this, I would go as far to say abomination. But I mean, there are some
just shy of abomination. I mean, there have been some Casio Gazone phones that I would say are truly abominations in terms of design.
Well, I mean, there's this whole I mean, we're talking about this whole glass panel thing that covers the top of the top third of the device, and suppose could be that you have a lot of antennas going through there, so better reception on all fronts, and we also have the camera Do you see what I see next to that camera?
No, I don't. What do you see?
Three tiny holes, just well, not perpendicular, but just like in line. The three tiny holes, and we don't know what are in those holes. I mean, safe to assume that there has to be a microphone in there, maybe a laser autofocus, maybe even flash, but we aren't sure. And
Actually, that trio sounds pretty reasonable, though. The idea
it's
that
pretty reasonable, but I wouldn't be surprised that something comes out of a left field on this.
Well, so I mean, already if these renders turn out to be true, I mean, obviously we're always working with sort of gross.
I mean, it's just one. Yeah, it's one interpretation. Remember that we're dealing with a render that was made from just verbal details. So
yeah. And so in looking at this, and let's say this is pretty close to what we're actually going to get, we can already say that this is probably not going to be Tango. I know a lot of people were wondering if we'd see a Nexus with Tango on board for better augmented reality applications. I'm actually kind of surprised that we haven't seen more traction on that directly from Google. But we can be pretty sure that's not it. I think your trio of devices for those three dots sounds like that could be legit. So you would have one hole that gives us that LED flash, one hole that gives us a better front directional microphone for when you're shooting video. This is something that I really wish more manufacturers would do from the classic Nokia days, where you would have mics sort of all over the device as opposed to just on the top and bottom of the phone. That would make a lot of sense. And
to continue my speculation streak that you have me on, maybe that this design. I mean, we're missing. It's Swiss cheese here. What we're learning, and maybe that this. What's the larger one? Sailfish.
Is the sailfish?
Sailfish is the smaller one.
Marlin
is the bigger one. Yeah, but Marlin is the bigger one.
Okay.
Maybe the Marlin has this unique multi-sensor setup on the back, and that it can do the tango, it can do the foxtrot and all that. It can dance, basically.
Well, I mean, from what I saw with what Lenovo had to do for the Vibe to put Tango on the back, I think it would be pretty clear. I think we would be hearing someone talk about multiple camera sensors and then depth sensors. So, I mean, there are 5 or 6 ports that are necessary on the back of a Lenovo Vibe to make Project Tango work. So I think that would be, I mean, you talk about Swiss cheese. You got to Swiss cheese the back of a phone to get all that stuff back there. I think a verbal description of a Nexus would probably include, oh yeah, and there are like 12 holes on the back. Real quick, we got in the Q&A from Panzer Z. Panzer Z writes, I just want them to bring back wireless charging, especially that non-metal window section. Do you think we could build that in? Because you need a coil. So it needs to take up some space, but do you think we could build that in next to the fingerprint sensor? Do you think that would conflict, or do you think that we're going to be stuck with the metal section of this body not allowing us?
It's going to be a little bit awkward, to be honest, because if we're talking about the top third, when you're laying this down on a charging pad of sorts, like you're going to have the bottom 2/3 of it, and it's going to be weird, especially if you're like on a tilt stand, it's the matching coil is more towards the center, so awkward to say the least, and I think I'm hedging towards no.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to work it in. Now, we've got another Q&A from Peter Hayton. Hold on, let me pull this up here to the top. This design looks interesting. I think this design may look good in real life, especially if HTC builds it. Remember how ugly some of the 6P leaks looked? I definitely think beauty is in the eye of the beholder on a lot of these. Because there are people who have held the Nexus 6P and still don't think that LaForge bulge on the back looks super keen. But the one thing that I kind of snap back to is... I was a really big fan of the old Evo devices on Sprint that were built.
Yes. I did mention, the 4G LTE was like crazy.
I think HTC could do something really, really interesting with a mix of different materials. Glass seems to be the way to go for a more premium built phone. I
different colors too.
Oh yeah, and if we get color options, I think that could look really cool with glass and colors and stuff that you put together mixed materials.
One of the things is electric blue, and I don't know what's up with blue these days. You got the coral blue from the Note 7, you got the space blue which might be space black instead from Apple. Blue seems to be the it color of mid
Man,
2016.
I think we're coming full circle. I remember when the Lumia 900 came out and we got that really pretty cyan. I still think that's one of the sharpest looking phones ever made in the history of smartphone design, that matte
cyan
polycarb cyan. We've got one other before we move on, because we got to talk about some Nexus wearables. This is from Adrian K. I can't think of any functional reason to not have front-facing speakers. I don't think it makes any sense to have to cup to your hand to be able to hear sound properly. And do you think that this is something that we're going to continue seeing? HTC gave us interesting split speakers on the HTC 10, where there was a front-facing speaker and then sort of a bottom-firing subwoofer style.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see if HTC implements that boom sound configuration, and it would be a better workaround than Google's standard design, because we did see this on the 5X and the 6P too. So, and even was the just the plain 5?
Yeah, the 5 has front-facing speakers.
Okay. I
mean, not the 5, the 5X. Sorry, the 5X has front-facing speakers.
I think the 5 was bottom-mounted, but there was that odd Nexus 6 from Motorola that had the front-facing speakers. So,
right,
kind of inconsistent. I think we're more trending towards the back, just off of pure history. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind the boom sound thing going on there.
Well, and one other thing that I think is kind of interesting is the sizes here. We are going to move on to Nexus smartwatches. I just wanted to bring up this one last point. So we've got a 5 and a 5.5. I swear, cross my heart, everything. I promise we're gonna move off of Nexus phones. But we've got a 5 and a 5.5. Do you think that lends any credence to some of the rumors we've heard about Huawei returning with another 6-inch Nexus to deliver a trio of devices for 2016?
I mean, I took their South African president at face value just by the whole blatant thing. You know, they did an interview with an outlet there introducing the P9 to the South African market about, a few weeks ago. And CEO just said, "Oh yeah, we're doing the Nexus this year again, by the way." Just want to let you know about that. So we haven't heard any leaks about it, and nothing else seems to be corroborating on that, other than trademark for the next Huawei 7P. It's not going to be. I mean, there is no Nexus in that name, so really doubts are abound.
And
maybe we could see it. Maybe we could see it at IFA. Like maybe
I mean,
that could be.
If it's not going to be a Nexus and Huawei is sort of just keeping the name, a number with the letter P after it, then IFA would make a lot of sense for them to drop that bomb. But how funny would it be if it's a phone with a 6-inch screen, but they're just going with incremental numbering? So it's Huawei 7P and then the 8P and then the 9P, and it has nothing
P9, 9P. Oh, geez. This is going to alphanumeric model names are just horrible,
so clumsy.
Horrible things.
I really want companies to come up with proper names for their phones again. I miss Evo.
I'm tired of
Captivate and
complaining about this, but you know what? This deserves a lot of complaining, so I'll keep the good fight on.
Well, let's save complaining for other items on our topics.
Yeah, let's talk about Android Wear.
Yeah, because we've got smartwatches to talk about, folks. Smartwatches are still pretty hot. We're gonna see probably a 30% growth over the next year, and it looks like Google's finally getting ahead of the pack here by delivering. They might be delivering some Nexus smartwatches. And so, I'm surprised it took them this long to kind of define what they think an Android Wear device should look like.
Sticking with the whole, nautical theme, because what's the term for fishes that have just that long beak? Because there's swordfish here.
You're asking the wrong dude.
I don't know. Yeah.
No idea.
Well, all these model names have been just based off of swordfish-like things, but I say that because we have
call them stabby fishes.
Stabby fishes. Well, Android police once again tell us that there are 2 Android Wear watches that we should be looking out for direct from Google. So it's Swordfish, and this one is a 42 millimeter wide little case. sort of like the Pebble Time Round in terms of design, but it's more smoothed out, and there's a single button on it. The Google's Mode watch bands will work with this thing, and it comes in 3 colors. Angelfish is the bigger one. It's about 43.5 millimeters wide, and it's thicker, 14 millimeters compared to the Swordfish's 10 millimeters. Just more smoother curves and blah blah blah. I mean, it's basically like the Moto 360 LG Watcher band, very chunky kind of thing, but apparently it's more smoother. So who knows? Exposed lugs, and that can't take the mode bands that Google has, and it has 3 buttons. We don't particularly know how those will work out just yet, so that's going to be interesting. This one is, of course, the fancy one because it has LTE, it has GPS, supposedly, and again, we're working with rumors here, and a heart rate sensor. And both of them should be running Android Wear 2.0, and it should be interesting to see how Google Assistant is going to be worked into these Nexus watches, because that's the word here. David Reddick makes the point that Google, like, they might keep Google Assistant exclusive to just these 2 watches in terms of Android Wear. And I would argue that, well, if they want Google Assistant to be accessible from all points, including Allo, including all the messaging clients, including all of the phones, why would they just keep it to this Swordfish and Angelfish?
Let me play devil, because I agree with you. I think if you want a service to be popular, you go wide. But let me play devil's advocate in that and we've got a number of people here in the Q&A, and we've got some comments on those stories on the website that we're all kind of a little surprised that it took Google this long to sort of release what the standard for Android Wear should look like. I think one of the reasons why Android Wear maybe didn't launch as successfully as Google might have hoped it would is there was a lot of disparity in those early Android Wear devices, you know, from the first LG G Watch all the way out to when now we're starting to play with, you know, Huawei's.
And we're talking, we like from the beginning, we were talking about squares versus circles,
right? And screen technologies, battery life. I mean, even just how you charged the things. There were some issues with pogo pins getting like sweat, you know, salt corroding some of those terminals. I mean, like there was a lot of consumer trial and error that went into those first 2 generations of Android Wear devices. So I have to echo that sentiment of a lot of people wondering, like, why didn't Google step in sooner to say, this is what we think an Android Wear device should resemble. And now you can go off and do other things, but we want to build on this platform to make the experience as consistent as possible. So if moving forward, if Google Assistant needs a particular set of tools, of hardware, of software, of just different pieces that Google says, like, for Assistant to work as well as it can, it needs to resemble this. It kind of makes sense to me that they would start with this generation and hopefully spur the next round of manufacturing from their partners. I have to believe, and this is, again, we should, again, label this episode wild speculation. I have to believe that if Google is going to throw down that edict, that they are probably already communicating with manufacturing hardware partners about what some of these changes coming down the pipe are. I mean, they're not going to leave an LG out in the cold. They're not going to leave a Huawei out in the cold. But that also means that for those of us that have already invested in the ecosystem, this is sort of the danger of being early to the party on some of these things, where we're going to be left behind if our watches don't support that kind of hardware. They don't have the LTE radios. They don't have GPS. And those things are all necessary for Google Assistant to work. I mean, it kind of makes sense where if Google Assistant is really going to be a value add on a watch, the watch needs to know where it is. That's kind of one of the benefits of having a Google Assistant on a mobile device. So I understand where Google might be coming from if they do come down with this edict saying, we're going to launch Google Assistant on these 2 devices and then examine what we can do with other manufacturing partners in the future. But again, it's going to limit how we move forward on this platform. And I think Google might be looking at this as a way that they can rein in some of the disparity of Android hardware out there in the ecosystem. You start nailing down some of these services to say, like, hey, if you want to use a service, you have to subscribe to this quality of hardware. And if you want to use these services like Daydream, you want your phone to be VR capable, you've got to check off all of these boxes. And that's going to make support easier for Google in the long run when more devices are starting to resemble that hardware layout. Same thing is going to have to happen with watches. You don't want this to be the Wild West where consumers still don't know what experience they're going to be in for if they buy an Android Wear device. If you buy an Apple Watch, you know what it's going to be. Trying to communicate to the general consumer out there what Android Wear brings to the table is a little difficult when they're looking at a Huawei watch, but then they want to get something cheap.
There you go. I mean, you can't really
be the same thing, and you have to properly prepare them for that.
Watch too. Yeah. I do want to move on from this, but I just have a quick tangential thought that is not going to leave my mind. Did we ever figure out what happened with the LG watcher? What was it? The 4G LTE thing?
I have no idea, and I've asked my LG contacts about it, and especially the ones that are sort of North American based are all sort of shrugging shoulders. This thing evaporated, and we have and it's no official confirmation.
TNT for some reason. I mean, it's back, so like it had to be a very fixable problem. It just went all poof on us just before it decided, or just after it decided to launch. So
yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. And the way that it sort of flitted back in, we saw competition from the Galaxy Gear S2 sort of step up to kind of fill that niche of an LTE connected device. Those are definitely the issues where Android Wear needs to address.
Horribly timed mistake for them. Ugh.
Yeah, especially for how much noise they made.
Yeah.
I think that was the big bummer, is that they really went out there to try and shake things up. I remember I was even doing focus groups with LG about what alternate watch user interfaces could look like, because LG was not 100% on using Android Wear for some of these features. And we saw a lot of those sort of prototype and demo watches that were being shown off at trade shows. Not shown off, but people were wearing them at trade shows. And they weren't running Android Wear. They had sort of a unique watch UI that wasn't Google based. So LG really stepped up to try and do something interesting, and unfortunately, it looked like all the pieces were
splatted.
Kinda, yeah, like in a gross way, not like in a funny haha kind of way. So.
Oh, sorry, LG. I'm sorry. We should actually rename this from wild speculation to Jules is being very plucky today, because there are so many things I just cannot let go. And I'm looking at the Q&A panel here. If you can select Margus Rasta's question about the batteries. Why can't they make batteries that last for a month? Well, you can have a battery that 30 milliamp hour battery that can just track your steps, and that can last for a month.
Yeah.
Once you start asking for a process, all these
this is a common question we get a lot of battery. We recently just produced a pair of videos on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Very general, very basic tips and tricks on how to improve your phone battery life on iPhone and on Android. Now, for a lot of the people that watch this podcast, listen to this podcast, or already subscribed to the YouTube channel, these are all tips that you know about, but we're putting them out there because we keep getting these questions from consumers out there. People who find our channel once every 2 years when they're shopping a new phone also have sort of general questions about phone maintenance and phone support. And so rather than me replying to emails, I can just send them a link to this video and say well, here's some best practices, some very general tips on how you can improve your smartphone battery. But one of the points I keep coming back to when it comes to questions about battery life, if you look at the history of smartphone battery improvement, we've seen steady improvement. I mean, think about it. Just a couple of years ago, it was a big deal when phones had like a 2,500 milliamp hour battery. And now it's a big deal when phones have a 4,000 milliamp hour battery. We're seeing progress, but we're not seeing progress lining up at the same speed as, screen display, brightness, resolution, graphics power, CPU power. And then the number of data intensive services that we use on our phones are exploding. So we use our phones far more aggressively. So if you went back in time 5 years and you used your phone exactly the same way that you did then, but today with a larger battery, you'd have 3-day battery life. But
Yeah.
that's not what happens. You get used to having the bigger battery, and then you just use your phone more aggressively throughout the day. All of these metrics about screen on time. It's like we need 24 hours of screen on time. That's not going to happen anytime soon.
And there's going to be no magic bullet in terms of technology that can ever fix that, because one thing catches up to another, and it's just going to be fun. I mean, I've been waiting for this whole graphite foldable, nanometer
right.
revolution to take off, and I still like, I was totally optimistic about it at first, but then I'm just like, well, you know what? I'm just gonna watch a ton more Netflix movies on it, and that's gonna be totally useless.
And that's actually, but that's exactly the point.
At 4K though, at 4K, exactly.
The second I have a more robust battery, the more likely I am to just stream more of my music and podcasts. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna find ways to use that battery. I'm not gonna just keep using my phone the same way that I use it today, where I have to be a little bit more sparing on the services that I tap into. I'm just gonna be more aggressive. I'm going to be more active with it. So, we've got all these things. We've got hyper exotic materials that could deliver incredible battery life if you wanted a $50,000 phone. Like if that's what you want, we could totally do that for you.
I'm sure the average consumer has that they could just spare it.
Totally, just let them eat cake. When you're out of bread, you just eat cake. That's totally what we do. But it's nice.
That was the
guillotine. That was good. That was good. Well played. But I think in the short term, instead, what we're going to be looking at are savvier ways that we can keep devices powered through faster recharging rates. I really hope solar becomes a bit easier for people to incorporate into other devices like cars, because it'd be kind of cool to have a more robust charging ecosystem that you can plug into. And something that's a little bit more modular. I regularly travel, like when we're on road trips and stuff, just because I have my little emergency survival kit. I've got a 4-panel solar charger that I like to break out. And, when our car's parked, I use that to charge up batteries and stuff so that it's not running off of the car's electrical port. And because I'm a nerd, so, we have backup batteries that are ready to go, and they were all solar powered, so stuff like that. I think, when we can find just little ways to fill those gaps. So when you're not at home, you can charge here. When you're not here, you can charge there. When you're not there, you can charge with this. And I think
so. I love how we're geeking out here, and I hate to abruptly cut off your point, but we need to start restraining ourselves here.
We're running long. How is this possible?
Yeah. I do. It's because we're having so much fun.
This is a nice conversation.
You know what? I love it. We'll get back to it if we have time. Maybe next episode, because we're gonna.
You know what? I think next episode, instead of doing as much news, you know what? We'll call it here right now. Next episode, let's do like a full-on Q&A. Ask us anything.
Yeah, let's do that.
Next week, that's what you're in for, guys.
Great idea. Yeah,
just right now.
We'll just go in line with every single Q&A question on the panel.
And how you might connect to your internet for listening to next week's show. You might be on Verizon. So that was a great segue.
I mean, you have all these fireworks during the 4th of July that might be able to block your signal.
Wow.
Sorry. No.
Sort of fireworks network defense shield, so that you can knock out Sprint's towers with a pretty display of aerial explosives. Verizon is looking
warfare,
into
people. Cellular warfare. So Verizon just unleashed its little fun fireworks changes. It told us to expect them next week. Well, this is next week, and today, Thursday, July 7th. It is the first day of these changes. And what are those changes? Well, a new My Verizon app for iPhone and Android. So sorry about you Windows Phone folk. And more data, more prices, more money for that data.
More data, more prices.
More money,
that's
more
totally
problems,
Verizon in a nutshell. You very well summed up. More money, more problems.
I don't know what they want from me.
So what I mean, like looking at these plans, so every plan is getting more data, but they're also raising prices.
Yeah, it's a third more data for about 10 to 15% more in terms of price, which all in all, I mean, it's
better, but I'm still like these small, medium, large, extra large, extra large. 24 gigabytes of data for $110 a month before
plus the $20 access fee. That doesn't change.
Exactly. and for individual fees for every device that you put on. And so I totally understand where Verizon is the top dog in the United States. They're the number one carrier. They've got the most robust LTE.
They can demand these prices,
They
but
can, but
I do want to go to the features, the new features that they have, though, just to see if you feel if there's a kowtowing going on. So new features that you can turn on: carryover data, which is unused data that you have at the end of the month. It gets recycled over to next month's allowance, and it's only a 30-day rotation period, so you can't keep it for a whole year, unlike some other carriers.
Which shall remain nameless. T-Mobile.
Yeah.
I guess they didn't remain nameless.
On carriers, I would have said. Safety mode is basically a switch that you can turn on, and it does
this feature actually. I mean, safety mode actually does sound kind of cool. Where what we're talking about is an LTE throttle. So when you enable the safety mode, you are radically slowing down your data connection just to prevent background shenanigans. Like, for example,
it's like how other carriers advertised unlimited data and like this your LTE bucket afterwards you get throttled down.
So I accidentally blew through my allotment this month because I forgot to. So for work, when I went up to San Francisco to cover the Moto Z, I had my OneDrive on and uploading over any data connection, so Wi-Fi or cellular, so that I could get content up and we could try and get videos out. I forgot to turn that off. And so I went and shot something like 3 gig worth of video clips for some of our camera challenges.
I hope you have that on our expenses.
So my month is already tapped out. I might be using a review unit and SIM card in a phone right now just to try and sort of pad out this month. But it's those types of things. If you have these safety, I actually really like the idea of having, if you have metered data, a throttle or a safety switch, especially if you're in a family situation where kids don't always understand the impacts or ramifications.
And just so you know, this is account level. This is not per line level. So if you slow down, if you decide to slow down, everyone gets slowed down. So that's important to note.
That is important to note. I agree. And so we've also got a couple other things here. So the data boost, which adds a spare gig for $15 though.
That is a steep price. I mean, it's geez, like what we're talking about on Project Fi, $10 a gig. And then we have, I mean, just the prorated, is that the right term? Prorated charges per gigabyte on these plans. Like we're talking 24 divided by 110, that's like 5-ish. Come on.
No, so
4-ish.
That's also another thing that's always bothered me about the way that we meter data. I really feel that we should be looking at data speeds, not data quantity. Yeah, I think it makes more sense, really, when you think about it. You look at like your home internet connection, and you start off with a very basic, like maybe it's a 10 megabit per second line, and that's $30 a month, and then you pay more for faster speeds, upload and download speeds, and that makes sense to me. That's how you can kind of manage who needs more access, who needs less. That's how you kind of keep your network congestion in check.
Or bandwidth friendly, I guess.
This notion of for each month, I'm going to buy a 24 gigabyte flash drive for $110. And let's say I only use 20 gigabytes of that. I only get that last 4 gigabytes for remaining 30 days. And then anytime I go over that, I have to buy additional 1 gigabyte flash drive for $15 a pop. I mean, that metaphor would never work for any other type of data situation. And yet we kind of just take it for granted in the world of cell phones and carriers. And that's more than anything else, something I really wish we could get away from and just get back to sort of a one standard idea of network tier in terms of data speed instead of putting these caps. Because these caps only really serve to chill services that are data intensive. And I think a lot of people out there, I think like T-Mobile's experiment of streaming video. I think that is an example of how consumers understand, or most consumers or maybe don't understand, but they just don't seem to care.
I mean, it's a thicket of, but the general idea is that, hey, you're giving up some liberties in terms of bandwidth for free movie viewing. It's
And that's
good.
the second tagline for this episode: a thicket of ugh. But those are the new Verizon plans, and of course there was an immediate
well, hold on. I just want to get a couple more things because I do want to point out some caveats here. I know.
We haven't been pointing out caveats this whole time.
I mean, it's been. I know we're slow rolling this, but hang on. Unlimited talk and text.
Quick roll, ready, go.
Mexico and Canada, and standard LTE usage applies. Whatever. So we're talking about this. This is free for XL and double XL plan customers. Safety mode is free for those customers, and if you're not on those plans, it's $5 a month.
You got to be kidding me! Seriously,
yeah.
The safety mode throttle.
Mexico, Canada, it's $2 per day per line if you're not on those XL, XXL plans.
So this is what I was curious. Panzer Z wrote this in the Q&A before he told me that. Don't you need to pay for safety mode to turn it on? That's ridiculous.
Yep.
So I take back every nice thing that I just said about safety mode.
Verizon says that they looked at how their customers are using data and that's figured
ridiculous. The people who would need safety mode the most, having smaller data caps, have to pay for a So at this point, just look on your phone. There's a setting in your wireless activity if you're on an Android device at least, and I'm sure there's probably some throttle on the iPhone. I'm on iOS 10, so I don't know where anything is right now. That you can set your own alerts and warnings if you're going over too much data. Just use that. Do it for free. Verizon, that is one of the. I'm so frustrated. Words.
So I know that you're struggling to put out a reaction. Why not let the other carriers react?
Yes,
so of course, Sprint and T-Mobile are the more voracious ones out there that are going after the number one any way they can, underdogs that they are. Sprint came out with this little thing. Of course, Verizon teased out the fireworks aspect that expect fireworks next week. Ooh. Well, this little tweet from Sprint News says apparently this is what Verizon considers fireworks, and it's just a hand showing a little sparkler, a little fun that you wave around as a child,
a little firework,
a little barbecue. It's fun. Marcelo Calore got on the action as well. I do like their press release though. And it's a whole bunch of title. Sprint to Verizon, nice try, ellipsis, but Sprint is still a much better deal, saving customers 50% off most current Verizon plans. Subline, don't let a 1% difference in network reliability cost you twice as much. Overland Park, Kansas, July 6, 2016. Point made. Now, I know it took a whole bunch of words to get to that 2-word press release. But I still think that with that and the whole bunch of empty space below it before they went to the about Sprint thing, I still think that's a pretty good mic drop. That is a pretty good mic drop.
Especially coming from Sprint. I mean, Sprint has been that little stepchild that we've been picking on for so long. So, anytime they can come up with a plucky rejoinder, I'm gonna be okay with that.
Yeah, especially it's out of character. Well, not really out of character these days, but I guess it's more a unique response as opposed to what we can expect from T-Mobile CEO John Legere. He's typically very upfront in your face about it, and of course he would have like 9 or 10 tweets just railing against
I'm surprised he didn't do more on video. He was doing that for a long time too, where he'd video
in front in interesting backgrounds, wearing little blazer jackets. It's fun.
His magenta t-shirts.
Yeah, it's he's
fun.
Just awesome. But of course, you call safety mode shakedown mode, and then you decide, hey, why not make this a giveaway? Let's give away a 64 gigabyte iPhone SE to the person who is willing to hashtag the best caption to this photo or this little picture here. And with this, so you describe it because I'm not good at describing what I see.
Oh, so it's a
Yeah.
picture of a schoolyard bully wearing a Verizon t-shirt, holding a little kid
I
upside down named
I've never
customer,
been good at this whole Pictionary thing. I
and
apologize.
punching what appears to be punching a $5 bill out of the customer for shakedown mode. So John Legere like posted this up. If you want to try and win a 64 gigabyte iPhone
Yeah,
SE,
hold on. Let me see if we have a winner here,
I
just
don't
in
think
case. But
anyone, but there are 167 retweets. So this didn't get a lot of traction for a John Legere post. But what I think is hysterical while Jules pulls this up, the Verizon Twitter account has been trying to trash talk John Legere fierce on this. So we've got a reply here from Verizon. We notice you're a heavy tweeter, but we hate to think how many tweets aren't getting through on your network. Where's the other? There's another one down here from, again, Verizon, and Verizon is replying to almost everyone who has tweeted on this post. So someone else said, like, hey, I'm getting really tired of Verizon's nonsense. My wife's Galaxy S7, will that work on your network? And then immediately there's a customer service rep. Oh, we saw your tweet and devastated to lose you. I'm here to help. What happened? Why do you feel this way? Like, they are. So in all the things you started off with, do I feel like any of this is conciliatory, or do we think like Verizon is actually starting to respond to different market forces? And I'd have to say yes. This notion of them being completely indomitable is radically being chipped away, and their last couple major ad pushes have not inspired a lot of consumer loyalty. And I think that they're starting to see the effects of some of the more outlandish shenanigans from a Jean Legere, some of the savvier Sprint buys. And out of all of this, you know, AT&T is sitting quietly at number 2, watching these other 3 carriers eat each other alive and just kind of coasting right now. Like, they don't need to do anything because these other 3 are kind of trashing each other for them. So AT&T can sit there with their cute little AT&T rep, who's like plucky and adorable, and that's all you need to know about AT&T.
Yeah, Lily, who's actually what I don't remember her nationality, but she was actually a refugee. And
I didn't know that.
It's Bosnia and Herzegovina. I love looking up actors IMDb, so it's just
I swear, I mean, because I've met a few AT&T reps, and I actually know one person from AT&T who works in their PR department, who I swear Lily is based on. Like, if you met this woman in real life, you'd be like, oh, well, that's Lily.
Fun.
Yeah, exactly. And sort of vibrant and silly and goofy and stuff.
Put it back on the front line. By the way, Nick Yosek at Nick Yosek got the
the
iPhone SE.
The iPhone's already been
the tagline: when Verizon wants change, they literally mean it. That's pretty clever.
That's not bad. I'll give him that. I don't know that that's worth a 64 gigabyte iPhone SE, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So we've got from the Q&A and Zane Winter, and I wanted to throw this to you too, Jules. What do you think would be the perfect data plan realistically?
Oh geez, can I say unlimited data?
No, I mean, seriously, try and put the math down, because I mean, we've played with a couple variations on unlimited. We played with data.
Like, we would have to talk about price, and we would have to talk about that philosophy. I don't know. So, it's hard too, because we're talking prepaid, postpaid environments, and
let's say it's models. Not like an MVNO or a prepay or anything like that. Let's say it's an actual
because when you ask me for this stuff, I want to just start making charts and just making sure that this is relatable to that factor, and X goes into Y. Are you going to be
diplomatic on me? Are you going to bow out? You're going to bow out.
Yes, I am going to bow out.
Okay,
because
so Zane, my question. So to answer your question, and because Zane added to my other question, how much do you think consumers should pay per gig on a data plan? I'm going to go back to my last point. What I think would be a perfect data plan, instead of putting a cap on the quantity of data, would be to put a cap on the speed. So you can go with a very basic calling, texting plan that has like a 500K data connection. Something really, really slow, but that's enough to get your emails sent to you. That's enough to get WhatsApp messages, sort of. That's just enough bandwidth for you to tackle some of the basics. And that's something that, like, I don't know, like, my mom could probably benefit from a plan like that, because she's not doing a ton of heavy multimedia. And then you increase the tiers and the pricing based on the speed of the connection, not how much data you might use in a month. I hate this guessing game of, well, if I stream Pandora today, am I going to hit my cap at the end of the month? That's the kind of thing that I really think does a huge disservice to developers out there. The people, data intensive services are going to get more intensive, not less intensive in the coming years. We're going to rely on data more, not less. And so with Comcast and AT&T putting caps on home internet, and now with the way that carriers are capping and throttling data depending on what type of service and what type of plan that you have with them, that's what I would like us to get away from. I think if consumers just knew your connection is going to be slow as crap, that's fine, because they can make that choice for themselves, but then they never have to worry if their kids go on a WhatsApp bender and max out their data plan, the family plan or something like that. I think that would be way more fair to people out there. I think that would be way more economical, and I think people would be able to make better shopping decisions because they're not apt to overbuy for their data, and they're not apt to underbuy and then get hit with overages when they have to buy a gig of data at $15. Instead, they just had a slow as crap connection, or they were willing to pay $150 a month for a 60 megabit per second data connection. Great. If they can afford that, go for it. Awesome. Mazel tov. So that's what I would love to see happen, is for, maybe even an agency like the FCC to say, like, hey, in making smartphone purchasing plans more fair and easier to understand, let's just all talk about speed. Let's not talk about caps. Let's not talk about throttling. Let's not talk about, you can do this, but then your data rolls over. But if it's on a Tuesday, then your data doesn't count, any of this crap. And they could just say, you've got a fast connection, you've got a slow connection. Your fast connection costs more, your slow connection costs less, and we can all get on with our lives.
I agree. I'll just say that when you have nothing worth saying, or
I think in terms of making things easier to understand and situations where companies have dropped the ball on being misleading, we can actually talk about some Huawei news.
Oh dang, that was a nasty little trick you played on me there.
Again, my segues are terrible. I need to do like an entire episode of nothing but awful segues.
Oh geez, we have all these episode ideas. We're gonna put them out to you folks. It's gonna be horrible path ahead, celebrating our 4th year on air. Ugh,
but to the news at hand.
Huawei and Leica partnership, blah, blah, blah. This was written by Adrian. I don't know why I'm reading it right off. Basically, they shot a model. I think it was a Instagram model.
Well, first of all, I mean, for anyone who's not familiar, we've been talking about the Huawei P9 for a little bit, and I think it's an amazing smartphone camera for stills.
Oh, yeah.
This thing has been a gorgeous performer. We did a real camera review. I think there's something like 12 minutes of samples that you can check out from this dual camera sensor setup. Leica is involved in the design. They didn't actually manufacture the glass or the camera sensors, but they are in charge of sort of the quality assurance and the actual software for the image processing. So I think this is a phenomenal performer. Now, the problem is when we start advertising amazing camera systems, we want to show off amazing photos. And this is where Huawei got themselves into trouble, because the amazing photos that they're showing off, like Jules was talking about, if you're watching the YouTube video, there's this gorgeously lit, glowing model, sunset light, golden hour. It's a stunning shot. This shot, you'd be proud to say that you shot this shot, regardless of what camera you shot it from. But the Huawei PR team shot that from a Canon 5D Mark II.
So yeah, and it's all right. So let's put this in context. I'm trying to find their marketing thing that they did. Oh, it's the little post that they did. So here's the wording, and see if you can tell what they're trying to imply here.
Okay, we've got shenanigans. See if you can identify where the shenanigans are in this PR copy. Ready, go.
We managed to catch a beautiful sunrise with deliciously Ella. The hashtag Huawei P9s dual Leica cameras makes taking photos in low light conditions like this a pleasure. Reinvent smartphone photography and share your sunrise pictures with us. Hashtag #O. All right, so what do you think this is?
I think I've identified where the public relations shenanigans are in that piece of ad copy. Jules, would you be so kind as to explain how they were able to get away with that?
It makes it sound like they made the 5D Mark II. It's the Huawei 5D Mark II.
And I'm sure Canon would have no problems with that company.
Oh yeah,
About their imaging.
Yeah.
But it's that line. It makes taking photos in low light conditions like this a pleasure, and that's how they got away with illustrating what a photo might look like from the Huawei P9, even though that photo was actually taken from a DSLR. And this is really disappointing because in our real camera review, there are some really incredible tools. Some of the best software image processing I've ever seen for things like creating artificial depth of field. It actually works really well depending on the situation that you want to play with. So they could have, I really do genuinely believe that they could have created a very similar image to the one that they used in their marketing from a phone. But these types of shenanigans need to be hammered because this is just, I mean, at best, it's an oversight. At worst, it's so disingenuous to
here's the statement that they put out afterwards, after they basically got caught. So the photo, which was professionally taken while filming a Huawei P9 advert, was shared to inspire our community. We recognize, though, that we should have been clearer with the captions for this image. It was never our intention to mislead.
Of course not. I don't know. This whole week has been like a week of really crummy apologies. Who's the guy that was doing the CS:GO gambling website and he didn't disclose that he owned the gambling website? Just came out with a couple days ago. It was like,
you got me beat there.
Anyway, I mean, like, we were more into gaming news. I'd have that on the tip of my tongue, but look it up because it's a tragic story of basically this YouTuber that was ripping off little kids, convincing them to do gambling stuff. And was acting like he just found this really cool website, but he actually owned the website and didn't disclose this to anybody. He's such
basically, we could be talking about bigger problems here, but all in all, it's just Huawei.
Well, no, I mean, like,
deceiving us.
No. I actually do think this is a big problem. This makes our job. So, Jules, this is just a problem for us. I mean, whether or not the audience wants to follow us on this, this is a big problem because now it's up to reviewers like us to sort of undo the damage of, putting up expectations that these devices might not be able to live up to. I can sit there and tell you why I think the P9 is such a great smartphone camera. Then you see an ad where they're using this $1,000 DSLR camera bodies in their ads, and then consumers are going to pick up the phone and not be able to deliver shots like that.
And then they'll complain to us about it. Are we going to be really on that sort of defense, though? I feel like it's just the company is the company, and we are its fourth estate. Like, we're just
I think we've done our due diligence, and we can point to a 13-minute video showing off what we thought the pros and cons of this camera are. But it's also why I think we it's our responsibility to illustrate what this thing can do, what it can't do, and then also this marketing fluff. And this isn't unique to Huawei. I mean, Nokia went through something very similar when they were advertising the image stabilization qualities on their phones, showing you what video looked like with image stabilization and without image stabilization against their competitors. But in doing the demonstration, they shot that from DSLRs, not from their smartphones. And again, they tried to get out of it by saying, oh, well, no, it was just an illustration of what image stabilization is, not image stabilization from our devices. And again, at best, gross oversight. At worst, completely disingenuous, so it's our duty to kind of clear up some of that information. But again, when we're talking about it, it's only going to reach a small fraction of the people that have already been influenced by these marketing materials out there. And that's why we also kind of rely on our audience to kind of not only keep us honest, but then also sort of help not let BS proliferate on the internet.
And in search of the truth, I think that we should all be banded together to expose fraud, debauchery words like this. Moving on to someone else.
So we've got some
Apple.
some
It's
Apple
great.
financial news. This is going to be a little dry. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this.
Yeah.
Let's not expand on the story too much.
So basically, there's been talk in the Taiwanese parts sourcing industry. And of course, Apple takes a lot of their parts for the iPhone from Taiwan, from China, wherever. Basically saying that Apple is putting the price pressure on these folks, engaging competing parts manufacturers in a bidding wars, and just asking for lower prices on cameras, PCBs, whatever in general. So,
and they're pitting these companies against each other pretty harsh.
We've been talking about Apple making so much margin on their materials. I mean, we're talking about $250 phones selling for $650. It's just this seems to be just another piece of the perpetuation of that.
Well, and this is
legend.
this part of and so I would recommend, we've got links on our article, but also look up the DigiTimes article. It's very brief, but they talk about more of the companies involved. I know we found it through BGR. BGR's write-up is a little more Apple friendly, but this isn't necessarily like, I'm not going to come down too hard on Apple. Apple is a corporation. They're not a person who's your friend. It's their duty to their shareholders to try and maximize profits. But this is an example of where we see the smartphone landscape changing and these devices becoming more commoditized. Can Apple expect to maintain those profit margins in the light of increasing competition and competent devices from Chinese manufacturers, Taiwanese manufacturers, and how we're starting to see some of those manufacturing shifts from high quality components out of Japan becoming a more global ecosystem of companies that can compete? That's where I think, Apple is in a really delicate position right now in looking.
I have to say, Apple is in its own league still. We're talking about $230 billion in reserves. Like, they
but if they
can
don't
just
apply that cash, it's like RAM. If you're not using it, what is it good for? And they can't repatriate that money. See, that's another thing, is they've got so much of that money in tax havens that just using that cash is going to incur substantial costs from taxes. So now,
the ultimate
they're paying back shareholders, and they're paying back shareholders by going into debt because they can't bring that money back into the United States. This is, again, Apple is not in danger of disappearing. They're not going to fold tomorrow. This isn't any doom and gloom prediction on your Apple stock, but this puts Apple in a sensitive situation moving forward if we're looking at a multi-year strategy. As smartphones cool off, consumers are less impressed. They're not the luxurious or lifestyle-defining gadgets that they used to be. They're not, glamour items like they used to be. And their money is tied up in ways that makes it a little bit more difficult for them to really utilize those funds. That's not a great position to be in for the most profitable company in the world.
You know what I think they should do?
What do you think they should do?
I think they should take the IRA glass route and just go for the public benefit corporation. Just do that. Reduce its shareholder obligation and just
go private.
Just go private. Well, or just go private, yeah, and then create a podcast telling the story about that.
It's season 4 of Serial.
Season 4 of Serial. This Apple life, this Cupertino life, whatever. Speaking of not that entirely, let's talk about OnePlus.
Oh, before we hit OnePlus, there was just one quick comment from Peter Hayton. Apple, please don't do this. Bargaining for lower production costs is bound to lead to poor quality products. It could open some more gates. And I wonder if that might actually be an impact. If I doubt Apple will ever allow lower quality products to be delivered with their name, but that's not to say that Apple hasn't had issues with some of their manufacturing in the past. I mean, we can always point to at least one generation of major Apple releases that has had problems. iMacs with crappy screens, MacBooks with too much thermal grease on the CPUs.
It's all about the negotiations. If Apple demands this for this amount of money, what are the yields that you're going to get, and what are your standards for accepting that particular component out of a whole batch of them? So,
and now, speaking of sales, 2 devices that are not going to be available for sale anymore.
OnePlus X, which was last fall. Yeah. And then the BlackBerry Classic, which was the beginning of last year. Huh. That's interesting. They're both out of production. One was end of lifed, as they BlackBerry announced specifically for the BlackBerry Classic. OnePlus X also gone for the most part. They have a limited availability, limited stock still left over. But after that, that's gone.
Yeah.
So,
But are we
what
really
does it?
surprised? I
Yeah.
mean, the OnePlus X was sort of a derivative experiment from OnePlus to make an even cheaper phone.
Well, that was after the OnePlus 2, which was a pretty controversial little thing, especially with the
Right,
810.
but we also know that they're not even going to go back to this tier. You know, they're going to focus on their flagship, which is kind of a mid-range phone with some really great flagship specs in it. And they're not going to bother with a lower tier than that, which I think is better. I think the company needs to focus on making the best possible name brand product that they can. I'm not sad to see the OnePlus X go away. I
Was
don't
it just
think
a hodgepodge, a singular event that just had to happen because, I don't know, they were sort of
well,
desperate?
I think if the company is small enough, I'm not saying that I have any insight on this because we're gonna go back to our tagline of wild speculation here.
Uh-huh.
I think OnePlus bit off more than they could chew. You had the OnePlus 2 coming out. They wanted to launch a new tier, a lower tier of products with the OnePlus X. You have a limited amount of talent under the OnePlus umbrella that can actually execute on all this. And I think that led to two devices that didn't quite capture their fan base's imagination like they should have. You whittle back on trying to do two devices, you focus down on doing one, and I think you end up with the OnePlus 3, which is a much more successful experiment than both the OnePlus 2 and OnePlus X could be individually. And I think this is better for the company moving forward. Cut its losses, move on, focus on one device, and then maybe bring more accessories to the table so that you can outfit your OnePlus 3 better, as opposed to having a variety of different devices at different tiers, which aren't going to satisfy consumers as well.
I'm more confused about the BlackBerry Classic getting
I'm kind of
the
sad about
cut.
this one, yeah.
Because I mean it's old components, but in a new, more modern interface. I mean, we're talking about BlackBerry 10. It's a device that's uh, running out the door, but it's still being supported by many enterprises, including some parts of our governments. So,
Well, but we're seeing the writing on the wall for that too. I mean, there was a recent story about Obama dumping BlackBerry recently.
the Senate is definitely the Senate, as a result of inventory that they cannot get anymore of BlackBerry 10 devices. They won't be issuing new ones to their employees.
I mean, I'm sad because, you know, BlackBerry was sort of a classic brand that I feel like I grew up with in a way when smartphones started becoming more popular. And the BlackBerry Classic is killer hardware. I know it's a little underpowered phone, but I actually enjoyed using the Classic better than I enjoyed using the Passport. There's just something about that old school BlackBerry one thumb ability where it's not the best computer. It's actually kind of a lame computer, but it's one of the best phones on the market still. You know, it's just the ability for me to hit one button and instantly be calling my wife or pulling up shortcuts to my favorite websites, or, you know, like, it's just so streamlined and so easy if you're used to that kind of metaphor for using a mobile device. That I'm kind of sad to see that go away, but I'm hoping that this means we'll see something similar but Android powered soon from them as a mid-ranger device. I think there's definitely a market for this type of candy bar style QWERTY keyboard. It's just such classic BlackBerry DNA. I have to believe that something like this will eventually drop with Android software instead of BlackBerry OS.
You still think it's the best form factor for business on the go, fast?
I mean, no,
No.
it's because business is now sort of evolved. You know, when business was mostly just short form text communication on the go, and then you would sit at your desk to do like spreadsheets and presentations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
BlackBerry made sense. In a world that is far more aggressively multimedia rich and dense on the run. No, I don't think it's the best, but I still think it's one of the best communication form factors if we're really looking at short form burst text, WhatsApp, instant messenger style communication. Being able to punch out a slightly longer email without hating, your autocorrect as much. And that there is still, I think, some validity to the notion of a truly one size fits all, one thumb device. Because really the people who complain about the form factor of a BlackBerry Classic are people that can like palm a basketball with their fingers reaching all the way to the other side of the basketball to touch their fingertips. That's not my problem. I can barely palm a baseball. So these hobbit hands. So, when I pick up a BlackBerry, I know that I can fully utilize that device one-handed while I'm carrying luggage or a backpack or a briefcase in the other hand. I know that. I don't know that if I pick up, like a Galaxy Note, I know that I can't do that. If I pick up a Galaxy S7, I might be able to do most things one-handed, but there are a few things where I've got to reach and I've got to slide an all-glass phone in my fingertips to hit that other side.
Suitcase, coffee in one hand,
right?
your BlackBerry in another. I mean, it's tough to see it go like that, especially when you're talking about things that still exist, like the passports, tall devices like the Priv. It's not fun to see them go. But what is fun to get back onto the OnePlus train to see happen? I guess it's just been another bad week.
I'm feeling for you guys out there in the EU and the UK, because I don't think we've even begun to scratch the surface on the ramifications of what's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, £309 you say for the OnePlus 3? No, not anymore. At least from July 11, it's going to be £329. So £20 up. It's not too bad. I mean, we're talking.
I mean, that's no, I was going to say it's almost 10%. It's not almost 10%. It's less than that. But that's still enough of an increase that I think people have. I understand some of the concerns that folks have when they're looking at how that might go down, because I think this could be just one of the first companies to just make it public. And we might start seeing those prices creeping up on a variety of places when there's any market uncertainty that makes people really nervous.
I think it's well within bounds of the recent drop, because it was 141 back, or 142 before the Brexit vote, and now it's around 130 ish. So I think that's totally reasonable.
Lost 10 cents on the dollar. That's pretty huge in the world of finance.
Yeah, there you go. And then there's the OnePlus 3 updates that brought us up to Oxygen OS 3.2. That was supposed to fix everything. RAM management, that was supposed to ease up on the draconian, closing of apps and stuff. And then we have sRGB gamut display mode, which everyone was clamoring for. I don't know why.
Yeah, this one I didn't understand why the excuse me. This one I didn't understand why the OnePlus users out there were so aggressive about this. There is something really cool about the idea.
Everyone else has it, but they have it. So why not us? Well,
no. I mean, there is something really cool about the idea of having a more accurate screen. I mean, especially if you're into photography, you really want to know what this thing's going to look like when it's on other monitors. That's kind of a tricky guessing game. If your device is favoring certain color modes over others. So that makes sense. But most people don't really want accurate. They want juicy and vibrant and saturated and warm and pleasing colors. They
don't made that point themselves, but you know what? When you have a forum and you're based off of the fans, then you do what you can and you do what you must. So, because
I know we fielded a lot of really unhappy comments. I can't say that I think the screen on the OnePlus 3 is one of its biggest selling points. I know we're sort of apt to praise when a device goes from LCD to AMOLED. I'm a sucker for an AMOLED display. I love contrast and color saturation.
But there was talking 1080p. You had that
the pentile
pixel arrangement.
So we can say, like the OnePlus 3 has a brighter screen than the LG G5. But it wasn't like we were praising the G5. We were actually super critical of the G5 screen not being as bright as we thought it should be. And
so it was bad compared to terrible.
Well, and what we're sort of trying to get at is the move from the OnePlus 2 with an LCD screen to the OnePlus 3 with an AMOLED screen meant different compromises. So the OnePlus 3 has better contrast and color saturation. Awesome. But fine detail, text, and brightness is all better on the OnePlus 2. So it's not just this one clear-cut evolutionary improvement. It's that you just swapped what compromises you were willing to live with. And I would absolutely understand people that would like that like the screen on the OnePlus 2 better than on the OnePlus 3. That makes sense to me. Like, I kind of fall into that camp. I'd rather have a better LCD screen than an okay AMOLED display. You know, all things being equal, if I can have the highest resolution with the best possible outdoor brightness mode, then I'll stick with AMOLED. But otherwise, you know, I just want a screen that I can see outdoors in California sunlight. And that's not maybe the OnePlus 3 as well.
I hate to pop your bubble, but this wasn't the point of the story. The actual point of the story. No, it wasn't.
I sidetracked it. No, I do that. No,
you're completely within your rights too. But you know what's the teaser? The big little thing that's been moving people off. I can't even get words out.
That came out rough.
Yeah. Well, the Oxygen OS 3.2 update that was supposed to bring everything together actually caused more problems than it was worth. The notifications started to get triggered only if you went to the corresponding app, and it just gave you all this stuff at once. And then there were other things like pocket drain. The display turned on if you had your phone in the pocket, probably because of the fingerprint sensor activating if it was against your thigh. So other issues meant that, well, they had to retract that update. And then they came out just today with 3.2.1 for Oxygen OS. Supposedly that is going to fix everything. So
yeah, we're going to try and fire it up. Yeah. I wasn't able to get 3.2. So hopefully 3.2.1 does actually address some of these issues. Because I think there is, like I was saying, it is kind of cool to have a proper RGB mode. For a more accurate display. It would be nice to see them kind of clean up some of the RAM management issues to actually utilize that 6 gigabytes of RAM. There are some things that I would really love to see happen in this. It's just it's tough for a company like OnePlus to get a sense of what these updates are going to do because their user base is smaller. So when they push something out, if they start seeing like, oh man, this is breaking stuff, well, you've affected a pretty large chunk of your user base before you can pull the plug on that and prevent other people from updating. We didn't get to update, but that doesn't sound like it was necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. So, we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. Now, I do have a special segment planned here. Before we get actually, we'll probably have to do it after the podcast because I'm kind of running short on studio time here. I actually broadcast from WERS now, again, my old alma mater.
So sexy. Love it.
Yeah. It's just, well, the talking, the voice part of it, the me, the intelligence, the brain here is not really working. But hey, at least I get to dress it up in mayonnaise and vinaigrettes.
I love it.
Delicious stuff. So we'll save that for after the podcast.
Okay.
But in the meantime, we shall go over to listener mail. That did not work because I didn't have the slider up. I have to remember to do that. There we go.
Oh, there's our bling bling. So our first listener mail comes courtesy of Cool Harsh. And Cool Harsh writes, hey, folks at Pocketnow Weekly, great job, week in, week out. Thank you very much, Cool Harsh. So my question is, what can Google do to more educate the masses? For example, a friend of mine bought a budget Samsung J7 and after 6 months grew tired of it and replaced it with an iPhone 6S and now hates Android. How should Google distinguish between a budget and a flagship? I use a Nexus 6P and I can swear by it. So it's up to Google to teach the understanding. Thank you. Continue the great job. So, Jules, what do you think? I mean, this is something we've talked about a lot on this podcast is how do you reach consumers with better education for how they might spend their money?
We're talking about quality here, right? Well, you get quality for the price that you pay. Whether or not that's going to be enough for you is a totally different question, and
Right.
I think that we're approaching this from the wrong angle here. But that's just me. I would love to hear what you think. Is this an obligation of Google to say this is what you should be getting for quality, quote unquote?
It's definitely something that I wish Google would help us address, because I think, it really does speak to your point. We went through the same problem with PCs back in the day. I had family members who would complain about how crappy PCs were and how awesome Macs were. And then you would ask them, well, what was the last PC you used? And he was like, oh, well, I had this 6-year-old Dell that I originally bought for $300. Like, okay, well, how much did you spend on your Mac? Oh, that's like a $3,000 Mac. And you're like, oh, well, that's probably why. Like, if you had bought a $3,000 PC, I think you would have liked it better. You might not have liked it, more than your Mac, but it probably would have gotten you closer, don't you think? And I think we're running into very similar issues with Android and with iOS. And I think in this new explosion of sort of mid-tier smartphones, and whether we want to call them mid-rangers or not, but at this like $400 and less, there are stonking great reasons to be buying in at those price points. But if consumers don't understand some of the compromises that they might face, they're apt to be more disappointed in those compromises in the long run.
As much as we could recommend a yesteryear flagship, I don't think we could as much a yesteryear mid-ranger.
No, that's a much trickier conversation. Absolutely agree. And even yesteryear flagships, it's tougher. Like, you can go and pick up, I think we posted a story on it on Pocketnow. You can go and pick up an LG G4 for like $200. In this day and age, is that really the wisest purchase? And that's a tricky conversation, considering the level of competition that's out there, and consumers have to kind of figure out better how to spend their money, but they can't do that if they don't have good educational resources at their disposal. It's a lot of information to chew through, even with our reviews.
This is greatest.
It's a tough call. So I totally understand where you're coming from, Cool Harsh, and it's up to people like you to kind of keep your family and friends on track. Unfortunately, I think the job falls to us geeks to be resources in our families, so that we know that they're spending their money wisely.
Yeah. Michael Lazoric says, I was wondering if you think Google will release a new tablet under the Nexus name, or release something like a Pixel C2. I'm just curious if you guys know anything on the subject. Love the podcast. I don't know.
No, so here it is, Michael. We have no official word on anything Google might be coming down the pipe tablet wise. I haven't seen any rumors pointing to an Android Nexus or Pixel tablet to replace the Pixel C, or to replace the Nexus 9, which is now no longer with us. So in terms of wild speculation, I'm going to say no. I don't think we're going to see Google push forward into tablets. I don't think tablets are hot right now. I don't think that's where Google is focusing their resources. I think they're focused on services and wearables, and that the phones will now complement services and wearables. And I think that's where we're going to see the focus of Google moving into the next couple of years. Tablets, I think, are going to be well served by their partners, as well served as the tablet market is right now, which is pretty cold. And I think that's kind of where we're going to end up.
Okay. And finally, OnePlus 3. Would it be a worthy upgrade from my LG G4? Asks Christian.
What we were just talking about. I completely forgot that I picked this email. This is exactly the point where I was trying to make. You can't just bulk rate compare the G4 to the OnePlus 3, right? No, you can't say one is better, one is not, because it all comes down to a series of pros and cons. I like the screen clarity better on the G4, but I actually think the OnePlus 3 is about equal in terms of brightness. So they're equally as to read outdoors. The camera on the G4 I like better for stills, but video is going to come out a little bit better on the OnePlus 3.
But all that aside, though, because specific situation.
Hold on. Battery life is going to be better on the G4, and I think on the OnePlus 3, and it charges faster than the G4. And audio on the OnePlus 3 is going to be significantly better from the headphone jack than what you get on the G4. So it all comes down to what you need and what you want.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about slowdown, if it's his specific case, that his usage is just creating all these problems for him, I say, just even if it's just a new device, just do it.
just take the plunge, go with the OnePlus 3.
Exactly. So,
well, I think we're gonna start seeing over the next year that the Qualcomm 808 devices are gonna start aging really poorly, and that makes me sad because I love the LG V10.
Well, there you go. Well,
there you go, folks.
That was fun.
This was a fun show. I liked this. This was great.
Man, so that is it for the Pocketnow Weekly this week.
We got a couple things to tease real quick. Definitely be on the lookout tomorrow on the Pocketnow YouTube channel. We are going to be releasing our first Pocketnow challenge where we test real world situations against editors. I've got the video all cut up. It's me versus Adam Lane in a photography showdown for 4th of July fireworks. And next week, because we teased it earlier in the show, next week is going to be a viewer take the wheel episode, a Q&A mailbag. Bring your questions. Shoot us those comments over at podcast@pocketnow.com, and we'll get answering your questions live on the air. It's going to be an Ask Us Anything kind of episode. So all those times that we've sort of shuffled off your questions, we're worthy, bring them next week because it's going to be the whole show. So folks, the show is ending, but the conversation continues on Twitter, where you can find Jules as @PointJules, and I'm humbly @SomeGadgetGuy. Shows like this can't exist without your support, sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology, and by dropping some reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever podcast reviews can be left. And if you're watching this on the YouTubes, hit that thumbs up button for a little extra positive reinforcement. Once again, check out that Pocketnow challenge tomorrow. The next week we've got our listener Q&A episode, so be on the lookout for that, because there wouldn't be a show if it weren't for you folks out there who are watching our YouTube videos and listening to our podcasts, who have kept us on the air since 2012. Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness, so make sure you tune back in.